Thank you very much, Rob, once again to be here with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I want to start with this very interesting question that Rick McAdock has on his podcast, because I spent most of my PhD actually looking at his different episodes, and he always starts with this question saying that he does not know any 10-year-old kid who actually goes to his mom saying, "Oh, mom, I want to be a strategy professor when I grow up." And the question is, how did you come about being a strategy professor? What is your journey, and what led you into this position today?
Yeah, thanks, and it's a great question. I think it was when I was 5 or 6 years old, I realized that I really loved sitting alone typing in a room, and that's when I knew my calling. No, I mean, really, it was serendipity, you know. Yeah. And I think there's a great Professor Christian Busch who's doing a lot of work on serendipity and strategy, and this was my experience of how I got into this weird world of business academia. So I went to a school outside Chicago, a university outside Chicago. I had to take a year off to pay for my expensive American education, and I didn't really know what to do. And so I called up basically put out some feelers and talked to one of my friends from high school, his dad. One thing led to another, and I went to work for him for the summer, and then stayed on for the year. He offered me a position, and I worked there to make money essentially, but we kind of clicked in terms of this idea of what entrepreneurship was about, the way he was approaching it, with looking at family businesses and the kind of unique way of being. So I left and went back and finished up my degree in international relations and German, which is the wrong language if you move to Quebec years later. And then he hired me just after college to come back and work full time for their Institute for Family Enterprising. At that time, he was starting also a kind of what became a global research project on entrepreneurship and family firms. So we partnered with schools around the world, including HEC Paris and Bocconi, started in Europe and all over. And through that, I got to meet a lot of, especially more junior academics who were studying family business. And I realized, look, if this is what I want to do, then I need to get a PhD. And so that's like feeling the research side. That's what led me then to go off and do my PhD at Syracuse. Yeah, but it was total serendipity. That was not strategically planned. It was an opportunity that came along, and it was really a great fit for me, and I'm super pleased with it.
I think it's a very great fit for you because you are doing very, very well on that. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
So you had a very long relationship with entrepreneurship from a research point of view.
Yeah.
And just to set up a little bit the stage for this conversation, I want us to give some definition to the audience to be able to very know what we are talking about. So what is your definition of entrepreneurship?
For me, well, there's a lot of definitions out there in the literature, and I think my approach to entrepreneurship is quite inclusive. So I take a broad approach. In terms of definition, I would say entrepreneurship is about creating the new. I think many people have a view of entrepreneurship as much more narrow around, it's around creating a new venture creation, creating a new venture. Or it's around this idea of a kind of very innovative entrepreneur that does something radical and disruptive. Entrepreneurship, doing the new, has many different manifestations. And so, when I look at entrepreneurship, I would say, the owners running the depanneur on the corner are entrepreneurs, but so are people in the Cape Town townships that are, selling braais on the side of the street. And so to me, entrepreneurship is around doing the new, being self-employed, kind of earning a living for yourself. And that's what entrepreneurship is really about.
Oh, great. So, and then the next question will be, what is the informal economy? Because you study a lot about that, and how do you differentiate between the informal one and the formal economy?
So I look at it along kind of two different dimensions. One is kind of legality, what's legal or illegal technically, and then what's socially acceptable or not. Most of what we call the formal economy is both, legal and socially acceptable. That's most businesses. But what informal economy would be is technically illegal, often because it's unregistered businesses, so they're not paying taxes, but socially legitimate. Interestingly and importantly, I would say, there's also a fair bit of economic activity that's technically legal and increasingly socially illegitimate. Things like offshoring wealth and those kind of things that, morality or the social legitimacy doesn't always go hand in hand with technically what's legal on the books.
From your research, how does it vary? What are the criteria that make something socially acceptable and another just not?
I think in part that is taking a broader view of what influences economic activity. And most of the way we have looked at economic activity in general and entrepreneurship is, through that. Do these formal institutions exist that can encourage entrepreneurship or not? What I think that has missed is the important role of informal institutions. So what's the role that things like family life play in entrepreneurial activity, that religion or communities or culture more broadly play in informing entrepreneurial activity? Working in this research space, we often position it as kind of distinctive from the dominant focus on formal institutions, but in reality, this is the way humans have organized economic activity forever, right? I think we often miss that because we take this kind of fallacy that the business world is in this domain where to be successful means you have to be an only economic rational agent, divorced from all these other things that might make you irrational, like having emotions or caring about your community or all these other things. And I think that's just a fallacy. It's not how most economic activity operates. And I think we can have a much richer view and better and more useful view of economic activity generally, entrepreneurship as well, if we factor in and understand the way that informal institutions influence that and embrace it as it is part of what it means to be rational. It's part of what it means to create things that those have an important influence, and that's a good thing.
How does your study on informal economy in Africa, more specifically, actually help us better understand the different concepts you mentioned, like entrepreneurship, growth, social acceptances of different economic activity? Do you see things differently from your involvement in that research area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's kind of given me a lot more awareness around the way in which informal institutions impact entrepreneurship. So, I think we kind of approach this in part because a lot of the literature that talks about entrepreneurship in contexts like Africa or really in the non-Western world generally, tends to characterize it, especially in international business, as, these are institutional voids. But again, they're focusing narrowly on, capital markets, those formal institutions, rule of law. We wrote an essay saying that we thought that was wrong, that it's not, you can't call them institutionally void. There are institutions there. They're just different institutions that we're not often used to in kind of North America and Canada. And I think often it's informal institutions that are shaping that economic activity.
Interesting. And maybe a solution to this question is maybe to be able to teach entrepreneurship in a different manner so that not only students in the business school have a different perspective on entrepreneurship, but also the society at large can have another understanding of what entrepreneurship can do or cannot do. And I know that when we discuss in preparation for this interview, you mentioned your willingness to start a school for entrepreneurship. What is it about, and what will be your vision about on how to teach entrepreneurship in a different way?
In general, I think the idea of kind of a big vision of having a school of entrepreneurship is really about teaching entrepreneurship differently and approaching it in a fundamentally different way. So I would say in general in universities, what we do, we have faculties that teach people expertise. We train you in this expertise and develop that excellence. What's needed, I think, and where I think the opportunity lies for something like how we approach entrepreneurship is how do we marry that deep expertise with a kind of building an entrepreneurial mindset? How do we infuse an entrepreneurial mindset of a way of seeing the world, that you see opportunity in the world, and increase your confidence in your ability to do it, and give some, tools and approaches that are going to help you do it. And importantly, I think, pursue the opportunity that you want to pursue and in the way that you want to, right? So that it's not just following one model, but that it is enabling you and giving you the confidence to kind of manifest the entrepreneurial trajectory that you want to be on and that you think will be good for the world. We work in partnership with the School of Music, and they will tell us to be a musician today is to be an entrepreneur. You're not going to get a seat in a symphony that's going to pay you a retirement. You're going to need to put together gigs. You're going to need to be entrepreneurial. You're going to need to craft your own identity, and that's entrepreneurship. And so, what a school of entrepreneurship can do is not train in a deep discipline, but spread this kind of transversal sense of seeing opportunity and being able to pursue it.
Maybe a tough question to end, which will be about your legacy. Like, how do you see your work, your involvement in so many different organizations? What do you want to impart to the next generation? What do you think it can be, and how do you wish? What do you wish it will be at the end?
Yeah.
I know it's a very
big question. I'm too young for that.
Yeah, I guess so. But even if you're still at the early stage in your career, even though you are quite advanced at the same time, because you are a very impressive profile once again. But I think that you might have, and I think you should have, a direction somewhere,
for sure.
Something you are aiming at. What would it be?
Okay, so I would say a couple things. What I want to do. One is take some of these from the research side. Take some of these topics that have been more on the margin and periphery, and I think you're doing this in your work too. Things that haven't been the dominant area of focus, whether that's context like Africa, whether it's topics like entrepreneurship in poverty, whether it's informal institute. Take some of these topics that are more on the periphery, as seen as fringe, and make them part of the mainstream conversation. To me, having played some role in that, it would be important and really meaningful. So on the research side, I want to do that. On the teaching side, I think, as we've kind of talked about, trying to transform the way we approach education, certainly in terms of entrepreneurship, but even more broadly, right? I think being part of initiatives and programs where the business school plays a more complementary and inclusive role with the rest of a university. I think there's so much potential in that. Yeah. I hope to continue on that path. What that means in terms of legacy, I don't know, but I hopefully be part of some of these transforming and changing the way we approach things. Yeah.
Thank you, and good luck with that. Thank you, Rob, once again for being with us and sharing your thought and on so very critical, central, but as well complex topic as entrepreneurship, growth, and informal economy. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.